we must reflect, at least for a moment in this busy day, I suggest, on the people of Syria. Some of us were giving speeches years ago about 20,000, 50,000 people of Syria massacred and hundreds of thousands displaced. Ambassador Ron Persaud at the United Nations on behalf of the State of Israel spoke out clearly. These numbers today are in excess of 250,000 killed, millions displaced. The world has stood silent. To the two justices from Rwanda, we especially thank you for joining us for this Nuremberg Symposium and sharing with us the tragic truth of a modern genocide. So when we said never again, and we all meant it, as we've heard today, where are we for tomorrow? In transitioning, therefore, to tomorrow, we have three activists who have made clear to the world they will not be silent when there are wrongs. They will stand up, they will lead, they will speak, they will do, and they will make people listen. Malcolm Hoenlein, the Executive Vice Chairman of the Conference of Presidents of Major American Jewish Organizations, in my biased view, has provided the most profound leadership in American Jewish life, and every person who is an activist or an inactivist in the American Jewish community, and for that matter in the world Jewish community, owes an immense debt of gratitude to the moderator for our scholars panel. Please welcome Malcolm Hoenlein.
I don't think I need stand. It was worth coming just for that introduction. You know, this is sort of what Dorothy Parker once said, everything has been said, just not everybody has said it. When you are like number 19 or 20 on the program, and we've all discussed this issue at some length, but I have the privilege of moderating and making some opening comments together with two people I greatly respect and have had the privilege to work with for many years. The question is asked, why remember? Do we want to dwell on the tsaras, on the tragedies of the past? There are those who accuse us of enjoying that, who accuse us of wanting to revel and to exploit these tragedies. Why do we ask a Holocaust survivor to come up here and have to relive the pain and the experience? And why do we gather from all over the world and come here to remember and to march tomorrow, to remember an event of such horrific and such a terrifying quality? So for us, I don't believe that this is an option. Forgetting is not an option. This is a sacred event and a sacred responsibility. The one theme that runs through all of the Jewish holidays, in fact, most of Jewish life, is one word, zachor, remember. The word chosen to symbolize the Holocaust was not revenge, nakama, or avenge. It was zachor, remember. When we remember the Exodus last week as we sat at the Seder around the world, the theme is to remember. Remembrance is not history. There's no Hebrew word for history, because history is static. Remembrance is dynamic. Remembrance means that you have to understand the causes, and you have to understand what flows from the events. You have to understand the whole dynamic of the process, because if you want to recognize it in the future, you have to understand what led to it. If you want to understand how to deal with it, you have to know what flows from it. So remembrance is at the core, that it's not just ritual observances on our holiday, we're experiential. We experience what previous generations went through in order to learn the lessons, in order to plan for the future. For us, this is a personal and a collective responsibility, just as this event is very personal for me. I am the grandson of Hermann and Sophie Hoenlein, then Hoenlein, who came from a community near Nuremberg and were deported to Nuremberg and from Nuremberg to their deaths. I am the nephew of Jacob Hoenlein, who was the kosher butcher in Nuremberg. I am the nephew of Friedel and Walter Dachauer and the cousin of 5-year-old Daniel, who were all deported from Nuremberg to their deaths. So for me, this is in essence a very personal experience, but it's also a reminder of who I am and why I do what I do. Shimshon Raphael Hirsch, the great German scholar, wrote 100 years ago that we are not judged by our children, we're judged by our grandchildren. That every generation is different in its own right ways, but you cannot judge the results until you see the ultimate outcome and how their grandchildren behave. What are their commitments? What are the values that they have? What traditions do they continue? I am here because of who my grandparents were, though I never got to meet them. And I owe it to them and to countless others to make sure that we remember. I came to Nuremberg for the first time and met Senator Hamburger, who was earlier referenced, who was head of the Jewish community in Nuremberg after the war. And he said, "Come and let me show you." And he takes out a volume out of many, just by chance. And he opens it, and on that very page were the names of my grandparents, my uncles, my aunts, all of those who were deported and killed. It was the first time I ever saw their names. And it was a reminder to me that it wasn't just happenstance, that it was a message to me of what my responsibility is, my responsibility to them and to their grandparents, to assure that my grandchildren will carry it on. They were all victims of the Nuremberg laws, which codified evil into law, legitimizing the ultimate genocidal design. They lived in the Nuremberg area for hundreds of years, longer than most of those who killed them. They had a greater claim, certainly, to being loyal German citizens. My uncle, Moritz, died in World War I fighting for the German state. So did many of my friends who told me the stories of their uncles, grandfathers, and others. Jews served disproportionately in the German army in World War I. I am who I am because of them, and I never forget them. I think of my responsibility to them. There is a collective responsibility and a personal responsibility, but I believe it's true of the victims as well as the perpetrators. We are told that the secrets of the past are the key to the future. Winston Churchill once said, "The further back you look, the further ahead you will see." Our sages said it 1,000 years earlier. And they taught us the importance of history is not about the past, but it is about the future. We look back to look forward. We learn the lessons to spare future generations those trials and tribulations. We look back not to exploit the tragedies, but to make sure they don't happen again. We go back as far as the Exodus, as we did last week again, to look at events 3,000 years ago, not just 70 years ago, to be reminded of the lessons, what we learned from our ancestors, the good and the bad, so that our grandchildren don't have to go through it. We do not get lost in history like the fundamentalists, but we look back to arm ourselves to meet the challenges of today and for our grandchildren to meet the challenges of the future, to prepare them for their responsibility. It charges us with universal and particular responsibility and obligations. 70 years ago, people, including in America, said they didn't know. It was a lie. They didn't want to know. We know from the archives that are being opened how much the Allies knew every day the Jews were being killed. They were described as marauders and plunderers. But every day the Nazis gave the reports, but the Allies didn't want to release it because they were afraid the Nazis would know they broke the codes. And when I asked one of the key foreign ministers, "Why didn't you release it at the Nuremberg Trials? Why did you wait 6 decades for the information to come out?" The answer was clear, though he didn't give it, that they wanted to keep the lie alive. It wasn't that they didn't know, they didn't want to know. Today, we have no cloak of ignorance to hide our shame because we do know. We know that we have to take the words of dictators seriously. Hitler told us everything he would do in Mein Kampf, but the world didn't bother to pay attention. Stalin told us everything he was going to do, but the world didn't pay attention. Khamenei today tells us exactly what he wants to do to wipe Israel off the map, destroy the Jewish people. Take him seriously. We learned that lesson. We owe that obligation to us and to future generations. How much has the world learned in the 70 years since the end of the war? Is it a more caring place? Is there more sensitivity, more responsiveness? Look at the Yazidis, the Christians, the Muslims, who are being killed in unprecedented numbers in many countries. Tens of thousands of Christians and hardly an outcry. That beheading becomes the major recruitment tool amongst young people, Europeans and others, who rally to the call of an extremist group, motivated somehow from this horrific scene of a person being beheaded. I had the privilege to speak 10 days ago at the UN session commemorating the 22nd anniversary of the Tutsi genocide in Rwanda. The genocide of Tutsis in Rwanda. And as I read about it and thought about it, and saw the 1,000 people sitting there, sitting in the same body of the United Nations that has passed so many horrific resolutions, I wonder what we have learned. Now we see the rise of anti-Semitism in Europe, in the United States, and elsewhere. The resurrection of isms that we thought had been long lost in the dustbin of history. We see ancient hatreds coming back under 21st century guises. All the world sees it. What do they do about it? When we see circumcision and kosher slaughter coming under attack, these are the first indicators. We learn it from history, although they do it under the guise of other concerns. In every generation, enemies arise to destroy us. We are warned in the Passover Seder. It uses the present tense to remind us of the enemies that arise against people, us and others, and our responsibility. What is our response when we can see a UNESCO meeting and taking away the Jewish heritage and the Judeo-Christian heritage of the holy sites in Jerusalem, removing every vestige from the Western Wall and Rachel's tomb and the Cave of the Patriarchs? What purpose does it serve? Because they want to take away our past to take away our future. We cannot be silent in the face of it. If we and those who bemoan the events of 70 years ago but do not speak up now against the rise of physical and virulent anti-Semitism in Europe, the United States, and the rest of the world, if we do not assert Israel's right to defend itself and its citizens, and if we don't stand up against the rise of bigotry and prejudice, then I fear those tears and pleas at Holocaust memorials are meaningless. We have to assert the right of every country to be responsible, and that their words, not to be hypocritical, means that it has to be followed by action, or their pleas are hollow. We cannot allow Jews or Israel to be the scapegoats again for societal problems, economic and political dislocations, to be the diversion. The media, which was co-opted and used by the Nazis, we see again how much of the media can be used to spread prejudicial propagandist lies and even hate-mongering to serve others' purposes. We thought the big lie died 70 years ago. It's still true when it comes to Jews and Israel. We see a country whose credentials are challenged every year, just one country, the country that has the most sacred and the fullest claim to legitimacy, sanctified by 3,000 years of blood, of sweat, of tears. Only its credentials are challenged. Only it is the subject of 5 resolutions in the Human Rights Council, 20 in the General Assembly, the only one with special item in Human Rights Council, the only one condemned by the status of women. We know this history all too well. And if those charged with human rights in the Human Rights Council, those great defenders of human rights like Iran and Syria and Libya, can sit in judgment of a democracy like Israel, it is a warning to us. Don't dismiss these things. They all have consequences. All of them lead to outcomes The BDS movement is another manifestation of this. It's not about 67, it's not about particular policies of an Israeli government, it's about 47, it's about Israel's right to exist. They are against Jews, the Jewish people, and the Jewish state. And if we fail to learn and to teach the lessons, then indeed we are doomed to repeat them. It's not a question of a particular policy, but the right of a Jewish state to be and the right of the Jews to a state. This symposium and the march and similar events should give us the mandate to be assertive, the confidence in the necessity of our mission, the courage to challenge the forces we see rising once again, the isms that we thought disappeared, that we had hoped disappeared. We can never take our rights and freedoms for granted. Never again is a pledge that each generation, Jew and non-Jew, has to take anew. We have to educate our young. We have to mobilize them and teach them that they can be efficacious. I'm tired of our being the canaries in the mine of the consciousness of mankind. I'm tired of being the barometer for human degradation and deprivation. I'm tired of the memorials to dead Jews and want to see a world that will stand up for living Jews and a vibrant living Jewish state. That will give true meaning to never again. The Holocaust memorials and events should echo with the words Chazak, Chazak, V'nis Chazek that we say at the conclusion of each reading of the book of the Bible, that we will be strong and strengthen one another. No matter where we are from, no matter our faith, we have a common future to worry about. If we stand up in strength and speak out with courage, then we will strengthen one another. And then our grandchildren can look back and thank us for making it a better world for them.